Hi, thanks for joining us today. I'm Steve Salinas, Head of Product Marketing at Stellar Cyber. I'm here. We're going to have a short discussion with Todd Willoughby, Director of Threat Operations at RSM. How you doing, Todd?
I'm great, Steve. Thanks for having me on here.
Let's talk about data. I mean, there's a lot of it. There's no shortage of data, that's for sure. What are some of the things that you and your customers or your other folks at your organization are seeing with data when it comes to data?
Yeah, Steve, that's a great question. Data is everywhere, right? It's the new gold, right? It's everywhere. So one of the things that we're seeing is the prevalence of data in places that customers don't realize they have data or can get visibility around it easily, or they don't think they can get visibility around it easily. And that's one of the things that we try to do, right? As a security team here at RSM Defense, we want to collect as much of it as possible, but where it makes sense, right? So the data we want to collect, we want to make sure that it's driving detections in the platforms that we use, Stellar Cyber being one of them. Not only that, because we also want to have conversations around our our clients so that when they're collecting data, it's done smartly, if that's a proper term for it, meaning that just because they're storing the data, or that's again more program maturity we can get into, but just because they're storing it, now they have to secure it, right? Number one. And it's not always, there's some edge cases around there. There's some cases that it's might not be good to collect some of that data because now you have to store it and secure it. So we want to make sure that we're collecting data in the right points, especially around points of ingress that threat actors are going to use against clients to get into these environments. We want to make sure that we're getting things, like authentications in there, right? That's the biggest thing I think today is if we can detect the initial intrusion into those data sets, we can stop a lot of the bleeding downstream, right? So it's important to make sure we have authentications from all of those data sources, whether that be from the cloud, on premise, even identity. We have a large identity practice here at RSM too, and I'm lucky that I get to work with teams of people every day that I have experts in all these areas around me at RSM because we do a lot of stuff here in security, privacy, and risk consulting, from cloud architecture and design to identity and access management, and my side of the house, the security side. I can pick up the phone and call these people and say, like, hey, we see this weird activity here from a sale point or an Okta transaction or something like that. And we have experts that can explain that stuff to us in real time. Not a lot of MSSPs or clients have that ability, unfortunately. But we want to make sure that what we're seeing is validated against the experts that can see it. And we're writing use cases to detect when anomalous activity is happening in there, so we get alerted to it first rather than finding out it, say, more downstream on the kill chain per se.
Yeah, I mean those are all just so important. And I think if I put my CISO or SOC manager hat on for a minute, there's so many data sources. We see reports where companies are using 30, 40, 50, maybe more
Yep.
products, all
Yep.
of them collecting data. And like you say, servers, everything that's in your environment is constantly generating data. What are some of the things you tell your clients? Like, how do you start to select which data sources are the right data sources to collect?
Yeah, I think, obviously the major, I would say the low hanging fruit in that area is things like Office 365 logs, anything from Azure or AWS, any sort of data lakes that they may have, right? Because that's, fortunately or unfortunately, that's what the threat actors are going to go after, right? And there are some threat actors that are going to breach the network to just do initial access brokering. They're going to sell the access to somebody else who's going to go do that deeper next level of crime, right? But I think starting off, it really starts with the conversation between the client and their vendors in adopting some sort of shared security model, right? These big data environments, especially when you talk about things that happened recently, like the Snowflake data breach, right? A lot of that, is a shared security model between the client and the vendor themselves. And if the vendor on that side doesn't have, I would say, good controls around some of that, or the ability to produce visibility to the client, that creates challenges, even from a security team on our side. When it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and we work with global organizations. So we have clients that are in Australia time zone, Middle Eastern time zones, Eastern time zones in the US. So understanding when those anomalies are happening, if they're actually really anomalies to begin with, or they're part of expected activity, scripts running, batches running of transactions, things like that. You really have to, hopefully the clients have a good understanding of that shared responsibility and security models there, that they're engaging with these big data vendors to begin with, right? I think it really starts there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of times too, what I hear, obviously we get a lot of questions about, do you integrate with this data source or that data
Yeah.
source, which is obviously that's important. That's what they're looking to do. But I think there's an assumption that, well, if you're integrating the data, you must be analyzing it and identifying threats there. But no, that's something I would just say from, if I were to give a little bit of thing to definitely ask the vendors, like, okay, so you integrate with it, what do you do with it? Are you
Right.
actually analyzing it? I think because just collecting it to collect it, certainly you maybe, and we'll talk about threat hunting in a minute, but that's not the same as having a solution that's proactively looking at that data, understanding it to identify threats. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think, again, you can collect all the data you want. If you don't have the use cases around it, well, one, you have to get things into a normalized taxonomy, which Stellar does very well. That's the big piece of getting the handle around it, the guardrails around it for a security team to start with, right? Because if we're looking across multiple big data sets and we're looking for destination IP, well, I don't want to be looking for dst.ip or destination.ip. So normalizing the data is a big piece of that, which is one of the harder parts of it, frankly, in today's world, because every vendor has their own taxonomies, right? But yeah, collecting it and making sure, like, there's some compliance and regulatory reasons why clients have to collect data, and sometimes there's not really good sometimes security use cases for some of that, and they just have to collect it for regulatory or compliance purposes. But we want to make sure that's like one of the first conversations we have with clients. Like, you have set of data A, what do you want to do with it, right? When do you? And sometimes the clients know better than us, right? That, well, we want to see when these groups of people are logging in between these certain times or these hours, or this activity X or A would be anomalous, right? And then we can write use cases off of that data and that normalized taxonomy to alert our SOC team when those conditions present themselves, right?
Yeah, I think it's like there's two halves of the same
Yep.
puzzle, or I guess you could say, get it, collect it, normalize it, and then be able to do something with it. So I
Yeah.
think one of the other things I hear a lot, and maybe I'll give my little age a little bit, but when we think about threat hunting, for a long time, and I think threat hunting is one of these topics where people debate it a lot. What is threat hunting? Who can be a threat
Yep.
hunter? Maybe just some indicators and things like that. But I think threat hunting has evolved a bit. I know that in our platform, we enable some what we call threat hunting, which is a lot
Yep.
easier. But what are your thoughts on the importance of threat hunting or being proactive?
Yeah, I think one of the things that when we came on with Stellar years ago was that was one of the attractive pieces of the platform for us, is it really put out those, we call them trailheads, right? So if you want to see PowerShell scripts running in your environment or remote access in your environment, you have a single click right into those things with Stellar that our teams can get to quickly. When, again, part of that problem becomes when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're trying to reference all these sources of data. Well, the alert is sometimes just a genesis of where you need to start, right? You have to pivot into identity, you have to pivot into firewall logs. Having those things that are pre-set up, those natural trailheads, really helps speed time to detection, mean time to resolution, things like that. The threat hunt usually derived from some sort of something our intelligence team is looking at, so we feed up directly internally from that. They execute the threat hunts based upon the known indicators at the time. We'll have to go back and update those, as threats evolve for certain actors and things like that. But then we move into, okay, here's our initial findings. Stellar allows us to go across multi-tenants very quickly to look through our entire data set. But we then move that into our engineering team and saying, look, here's the content, here's what we look for. Go make that continuous detection for the SOC to do now, right? The SOC gets access to all of our threat hunt reports. Obviously, if there's anything that we find immediately, that gets sent up to the clients. We start blocking and tackling and doing that stuff right there, right away. But we put it through a pipeline, right? And those pipelines are version controlled too. So threat hunts that we're doing for Lockbit, say 2 years ago, have obviously matured and changed. They've changed tactics and things like that. So we have the threat hunting team from the Intel team has to go back and update their playbooks and threat hunts and things like that and documentation. So they're constantly evolving. So it's more of a continuous threat hunt workload rather than a static time measurement.
Well, that makes it, that's so smart because yeah, like you say, not just a point in time, use that information to kind of protect yourself. That so with the pipeline idea makes
Right.
perfect sense. It's a step in the process. We've identified something new, we write detections around it. And the other thing I really like, and I think that's where a lot of organizations can benefit from working with a company like RSM is you get that network effect, right? Because you are supporting so many different customers. If you find something in one organization, everyone in your environment can benefit. And this is where
Well,
it's very hard for a single security team to replicate that at all. I mean, I don't know how you do
yeah.
that.
And I think a lot of that derives from generating your own threat intelligence, right? And fortunately for me, right, I work as an MSSP serving, hundreds and hundreds of clients worldwide. I get to see threats, and especially our RSM defense team gets to see threats affecting different sectors and verticals. Under that, we have clients that are in heavy manufacturing, oil and gas, healthcare, retail, financial, and we can quickly tailor those through different groupings of those clients and stellar things like that to target those specific industries so that we're not wasting cycles, compute cycles. None of that stuff is free, right? So we've tried to be as efficient as possible in that way, deriving our own threat intelligence. We have the normal tools that we go out, dark web stuff and things like that, but most of the threat intelligence we gather and use is derived internally. And access to that vast set of industry or vertical data that's we're seeing attacking these different verticals and sectors, we're able to stop those things pretty quickly and pretty efficiently. And it's something we take very seriously.
Well, and I think that's great. I've been in this around this space for like 20 years myself on the vendor side.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I really like that's happened in the last few years, maybe like half dozen years or so, is the rise of like co-management and work and MSSPs, because now, the security team isn't in alone. They can go to companies like yourself to they get all of this
Yeah.
that they could just no way in the world do themselves, right? But to really up level their ability to protect their organization. I think it's the right trend.
It comes down to expertise and money too. I'll tell you a quick story here. I had when I was consulting for another large Big Four company, I had a CISO out in the Pacific Northwest for a very large healthcare system. And I talked to him at dinner one night. I said, "Why do you need us?" Right? And he kind of laughed and he said, "Well, I got companies like Nike and Amazon in my backyard, and sometimes it comes down to money. That's why they can't afford those resources. They can't afford the extra 10 or 20 or $30,000 in salary um, to dish out to these potentially very skilled employees and resources that we can bring to the table here at RSM. And we have that whole team of people. There's our threat hunting team and our SOC team. We're a global operation. We have teams in Central America, the United States, India, APAC regions. We have overlapping capabilities of all of that stuff we just mentioned in those locations, right? So, and we work with our clients to figure out where we need to meet them at.
Yeah, I think so. My last thing. This has been a great little conversation, Todd. But I think my last message to everyone, if you're listening to this, hopefully you found this informative. You're not alone, right? You don't have to go this
Yeah.
alone. Todd and the folks at RSM and partner other ton can really help with this. Todd, if they want to learn more about the services, where should folks go and learn more about RSM?
Yeah, they can check us out on the internet, on LinkedIn, things like that. RSMUS.com. It'll take you to our company page. We're under risk compliance and security, privacy, and risk compliance. Or they can reach out to us directly. They can email me, contact us directly. We'll be glad to have a conversation with them. And it's just that, it's just a conversation, right? We try to, again, we understand clients have different security stacks, different tools. They want to receive their own return on investments they made in those areas. So we're not looking to rip and replace. And that's the beauty with Stellar is it doesn't care, right? If you have your own EDR, you can bring it. We're not trying to change your tools out. We're vendor agnostic over here. If you have CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or Carbon Black, I don't care, right? We have the ability to ingest that data, take the same response actions in real time through APIs. That part of the industry has gotten a lot better over the last 5 years, I'll say. And Stellar's been one of the ones and the partners for us that's made that a lot easier, frankly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more that the fact that our goal as Stellar Cyber and delivering this Open XDR platform is to give the control back to the security teams. It's not
Right.
our job to force any sort of product down your throat. We want to be there to help you and help our partners service the customers because our whole goal, we all have the same goal, right? We want to help organizations protect their environments better. That's it.
My two main things are stopping threats. Number one, I am not interested in kicking alerts over the proverbial wall to you to create more work for your downstream teams, right? So that's why we do a lot of analysis work on our end before we even escalate anything up. And then, frankly, to keep your name out of the news. And we've been highly successful at it. We've been doing it for a lot of years.
That's great. Well, again, thanks everyone for joining us. If you want to learn more about RSM, go check them out. If you want to talk to Stellar Cyber, visit us. Request a meeting. Be happy to discuss and see how we might be able to help you or point you to RSM, one of our partners, see how they can help you as well. So again, thanks for your time today, Todd, and everyone have a good rest of your day.